As we mentioned in our previous video titled, Who Invests in Private Equity? There are many types of investors that invest in private equity. There are institutions such as pensions, endowments, foundations, and sovereign wealth funds. And there are individuals such as family offices and select high net worth individuals. Now, in our previous videos, we have talked a lot about pensions and family offices. Now, I have to admit, that's because I'm the one creating these videos. I'm located in Canada, where we have some of the largest private equity investors in the world that are pension investors. And I personally have been working with family offices around the world for over 15 years. So that is why our videos have focused more on pensions and family offices. But in this video, I would like to focus on a different type of investor, the sovereign wealth fund. So in this video, we will talk about what sovereign wealth funds are, trends with sovereign wealth funds, and, as our title suggests, sovereign wealth funds in private equity. And we'll end this video with a final thought. So let's get started by talking about what sovereign wealth funds are. Sovereign wealth funds are basically state-owned investment funds that don't include public pension funds. This is separate than the central bank. These funds are invested with the objective of growing the assets under management, the AUM. Now, before we go over specific examples, let's look at trends with sovereign wealth funds. Now, according to Global SWF, an organization that conducts research and analysis of the activities of the world's major state-owned investors, in 2021, the combined AUM of the sovereign wealth funds around the world was $10.5 trillion. That's $3 trillion more than the $7.5 trillion in combined AUM that existed in 2016. Now, here's an interesting point about the location of sovereign wealth funds. Most of the assets come from outside North America and Europe. In fact, about 45% of the assets come from 33 sovereign wealth funds in Asia, and over 30% of the assets come from 26 sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East and North Africa region. Now, most large North American state-owned investors are public pension funds, not sovereign wealth funds. As for Europe, well, most European state-owned investors are pension funds, but there's an exception. Oil-rich Norway has the world's largest sovereign wealth fund with over $1.3 trillion in assets. In fact, many of the large sovereign wealth funds around the world are in oil-rich countries, such as Qatar Investment Authority, Qatar's approximately $350 billion sovereign wealth fund, Public Investment Fund, Saudi Arabia's almost $500 billion sovereign wealth fund, and the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, Abu Dhabi's over $800 billion sovereign wealth fund. So let's move on to discuss sovereign wealth funds in private equity. And let's start in Asia with GIC, a sovereign wealth fund in Singapore that manages Singapore's foreign reserves with a mandate to preserve and enhance Singapore's international purchasing power over the long term. The sovereign wealth fund manages over $700 billion in assets under management, and for the fourth year in a row, deployed more fresh capital than any other sovereign wealth fund or public pension plan around the world. In 2018, it deployed $18.8 billion. In 2019, it deployed $24 billion. In 2020, it deployed $17.7 billion. And in 2021, it deployed $34.5 billion. Now, in terms of private equity, well, GIC has been fairly active. GIC's allocation to private equity as of March 31st, 2021 was 15% of its portfolio, which is a 2% increase from the year before, where it had a 13% allocation to private equity. Now, since March 31st, 2021, GIC has continued to invest in private equity. As an example, for those of you that subscribe to our video newsletter, you may remember that GIC, along with Blackstone, Carlyle, and Hellman & Friedman, were part of the largest LBO since the financial crisis, the $30 billion deal for the healthcare company Medline. Now let's move on to the Middle East with Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, ADIA, a sovereign wealth fund in Abu Dhabi. ADIA has over $800 billion in assets under management and has been investing in private equity for over 30 years. ADIA invests in private equity through funds, co-investments, and direct investments. In fact, the sovereign wealth fund prides itself on its relationships with its core group of general partners. For an example of a recent deal that ADIA did in private equity, well, ADIA was part of a consortium including private equity firms Advent, Permira, and Crosspoint Capital, along with sovereign wealth fund GIC and Canadian pension plan CPP Investments that purchased McAfee for $14 billion to bring the company private. We covered that deal in our video newsletter this past January. And let's finish off with the biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world, Norway's sovereign wealth fund, which has over $1.3 trillion in assets. It's so large because of the revenues generated from the offshore oil assets over the years. Now, the fund is managed by Norges Bank with a mission to safeguard and build financial wealth for future generations. The fund does a great job diversifying its investments outside of Norway, but has not been active in private equity. The entire private equity industry waits every year for the fund to change its mind and to start meaningfully invest in private equity. But as of now, the fund isn't a big investor in private equity. Let's wait and see if that changes. Now, here's a final thought. Investors, here is a list of the largest 10 sovereign wealth funds in the world as of January 1st, 2022, according to Global SWF, sorted by assets under management. As you can see, the sovereign wealth funds we spoke about in this video are here. We have NBIM, Norges Bank Investment Management from Norway, ADIA, ADIA, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority from Abu Dhabi, GIC, Government of Singapore Investment Corporation from Singapore, PIF, Public Investment Fund from Saudi Arabia, and QIA, Qatar Investment Authority from Qatar. One other interesting point to mention about this list is that 3 of the largest 10 sovereign wealth funds in the world are located in China. Just thought I'd point that out. In this video, we talked about what sovereign wealth funds are, trends in sovereign wealth funds, and sovereign wealth funds in private equity. Do you have any comments about sovereign wealth funds? If so, please share them in the comments below.